You're going to have differing ideas about what's the best thing to do.
Yes.
And you need to be able to communicate and talk that out, but still at the same time, everybody getting what you want all the time is not the right answer. As much as we may joke and say, hey, just keep her happy.
Yes.
That's not always the case.
But that doesn't...
Even like Facebook groups where like ladies will get on and just talk about marriage and, hey, I have this problem in my marriage. The more you spend time reading about all these people and all their discontentment in marriage, I feel like that could maybe feed to maybe like, wait, you're upset because your husband does it? My husband might do that too.
Well, maybe that would help.
If it's Christian, we're talking about it. This is the Mike Charleston Show.
All righty. Well, this is the Mike Charleston Show. Thank you for joining us. We're here with Chuck.
I guess we all were supposed to wear blue today. Hey?
I
didn't think about it.
Yeah,
until it was
all in
now.
the spirit. We all felt it at the same time.
How about that? It's a very dark show. So, anyway, thank you if you're on YouTube. Thank you for watching. If you could just subscribe and like and all that stuff. And if you're on a podcast, we haven't asked anybody this, but if you're listening on Apple or whatever, you can rate the show, and that would really help with the show a little bit. I don't know what you do. I do that for a couple other shows, but anyways, today, as you could tell by the title. So, we have been doing some work on our house this week, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a new beam put in and everything.
Looks good.
It looks good. They did a really good job. And, when you do a project, and especially on an old house, you start opening up the walls, which, by the way, these guys, the rail out there, I'm pretending like I didn't do the job. So I'm like, I don't know what these guys were doing, and he's like, yeah, they must have. I'm like, yeah, they must have. I don't know what they were doing. But they've done a really good job of putting it all together and it looks good. But whenever you do a project like that, you open up the walls and you just never know what you're going to find.
You expose things.
Yeah.
That's right. Mm-hmm. And as you'll find out in our marriage segment, we were reading this book from 1955. How to Have a Happy Marriage or something like that, right? How to be happily married. Mm-hmm. And in that book, it went through what they called termites in a marriage, which was, they're not original, but maybe in 1955 it was. So it just got me thinking to go through some of those things that they thought were termites in a marriage. And then 70 years later, has it changed, and what are some termites that could be in a marriage? So termites, if you don't know what a termite is, you don't live down south. But termites will eat away at the wood, and everything structurally looks good. Then it falls apart one day.
Until it doesn't.
It will, right.
Yes, it's gone.
I just never realized that termites were not a problem up north.
Not as much. I'm sure there is.
Until I had kids that lived up north. Well, no. I mean, they can cut a piece of wood and lay it on the ground and come back 2 years later and it's fine.
Wow.
What are you saying? That they leave pieces of wood laying for 2 years?
They do where my kids are.
Yeah, we just really, I'm sure, I don't know, my parents probably have a termite protection. I don't know, but it's just not as much of an issue. Yeah. However, you were reading somewhere, and this was usinspect.com.
Yeah. So these are home inspectors.
Yeah.
But anyway, this is what they said. It says, this may sound crazy, but termites cause more damage to homes in the U.S. than tornadoes, fires, and earthquakes combined.
Notice they don't have hurricanes in it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, if you're living down south anywhere, and there's a good number of people that live in the south, and where it's humid and wet and all that, yes, you can believe it. There's termite issues everywhere. We lived in a house that had termite issues, our old house. And, you got to fix it, or else it comes crumbling down. Yep. And if it's not termites, it's rot. So that's kind of the concept here we're talking about, that in a marriage, things just don't go from good to bad all of a sudden, one day. It's usually a slow fade. It's usually like termites getting in there. It may look good on the outside, but then all of a sudden you push on it a little bit and it just crumbles. So anytime there's any kind of pressure or anything, you can't work with it. It just falls apart. And we see that in our country today, in society in general, in the world, where a lot of marriages just don't stand, they fall apart. Yeah. And so the underlying issues under there, we'll call termites, for lack of a better word. We'll call termites, or foxes later on. We'll call them foxes. But in this book that we were reading from 1955, it was a very interesting perspective, because they didn't have issues that we had today, but they still had issues.
Yeah. Some are the same.
Sarah,
She's got a list here.
she does.
Yeah, some termites from 1955.
So she has 9 of them. So I don't know how you guys want to. We won't talk about them too much because we got our list that we want to go through.
Them.
Yeah.
What they had in 1955.
Yeah.
So what's number 1? Fussing and nagging.
Fussing and nagging. That
I'm pretty sure that's still there
still
today.
there? Yeah,
sure it happens, but that's like when they say problems in school, like in the 50s it was chewing bubble gum and all that
Talking
stuff.
in class.
Right. And I'm like,
I'm so curious, was this in any particular order in the book?
It was in this order. It had a whole chapter of the termites that will destroy your marriage, and he just goes through.
So but is there ranking? It was like that, like number 1?
no.
Maybe, yeah. I don't think it was a particular order, but
Right, because the last few were kind of like alternates, they didn't get their own
some
paragraphs.
other things to throw in.
Right,
Yeah.
but we just threw them in there. So
Yeah.
number 2.
Meddling in-laws.
Meddling in-laws.
So not
Now, this
all
is interesting.
in-laws are bad, just
Right.
meddling ones.
Considering that Chuck and I, we share kids that got married.
We did.
So we're
That's true.
we're
Yeah.
in-laws.
We're in-laws.
in some way with our kids. But the point he was making with the meddling in-laws, not just that in-laws. Now in 2025, we're thinking of in-laws, to try to take over. Mm-hmm. But his thing was more of comparing ourselves with our in-laws. Like my mom doesn't do it like this. My dad didn't do it like this. And so you're always comparing your wife or husband to the in-laws, and you can never match up with the in-laws. So he did say, in-laws getting in the way a little bit, but it was mainly that, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
That is interesting. Did y'all ever have any of that?
No, not at all. No, I don't think so.
No. I didn't either. I don't know what that would be like.
My parents were completely hands-off. They didn't care. Your parents were a lot closer, and they had some concerns every once in a while because we were weird.
Concerns, but I wouldn't say that they ever were a problem. Like, it wasn't like we really...
No, they never interfered.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
Thankfully.
Number 3,
drink.
So
they're probably not talking about water here.
No, they're talking about alcohol and alcoholism, which I'm sure is still a problem today somewhat. But that was becoming an issue in 55.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Becoming an issue?
Well, it's always been an issue.
Yeah,
but
it's always, had to be.
Yeah.
1955, number 4, modern dance.
Yes, modern dance. Okay, whatever.
This is when we got away from ballroom where we're getting...
I don't know. It's just that when he said as a married couple, and I guess we see this somewhat today because we go to some events where we know couples that will dance. But he says when you go to a dance, inevitably you end up with a different partner. Like you're switching partners. And he's just like, anytime you're dancing, you're really close with another person, it's always a danger. And I would agree. I would tend to agree that it's just not, if you went to a dance where it's just like you're doing a dance, like these country dances that they do, and you're not actually with a partner,
right?
Maybe that's different. But these modern dances, I don't know what modern dance was in 1955. But okay, number 5.
Number 5 is jealousy.
Yeah, once again, I feel like that could be in any age.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Number 6.
Modern movies.
In 1955, right.
Yeah.
If we could only go back to 55,
like, wow,
right?
if they were worried about those, what would they think today?
And his angle was more of not the content, even though that was part of it, but more of the agenda behind it, just how the philosophies. Yeah, well, just the philosophy of how family life looked and all that. And I'm like, look, every generation has their issues with that. So, which 7 is just like it.
Right, modern novels. So.
Right, which number 8's kind of along with number 7, the love story magazines, which I don't even know if that exists anymore. But like the romance novels, stuff like that, they portray, and that's still current.
Yeah.
Where women love the romance novels where that guy doesn't exist. That guy just doesn't exist.
Not reality.
Right.
So like Hallmark movies with the 3 star?
It doesn't exist.
Man.
Yes.
And number 9 was clubs for men and women.
So
this is like women's clubs. Like on Tuesday, I get together with the ladies for this, and then on whatever day. And so it can also go further than that. But he was saying so many we end up with so many things to do separately, and
Right.
that's not good.
Yeah, and I guess in 55 that may have been more of a thing, and maybe it's more of a thing that I just don't know of as much. But
We don't do anything. So.
yeah, we don't go to the hall anymore.
I
I don't know, but there's a lot of guys clubs and women's clubs. So those were the issues they were dealing with in 1955.
Yeah.
I just felt that was very interesting, that they didn't have to deal with phubbing and internet usage and cable TV and just the things that it's dual income, homes and stuff that we're going to cover here shortly. But that was only 70 years ago.
Right.
70 years
Only
ago.
7, yeah.
That doesn't seem that long ago. And, but boy, things can change real quickly.
Yeah.
So that was their list in 1955. So we came up with a list for today. And some of these are going to be universal, that it doesn't matter what age, like the first one. I think this issue is going to be from the time of the beginning to the time of the end.
Yeah.
And honestly, this first one, which is selfishness,
Right.
can all of the rest of them
Right, this is a
back
root
to it.
issue, not the surface level
Right.
where it
Yeah.
shows itself. Mhm.
So it's
Yeah.
kind of like saying sin,
Yeah,
Sort of.
selfishness. But
Yeah.
honestly, selfishness is a huge issue in a marriage.
Yeah.
That is a termite that's underlying, and it's probably not even underlying. It's probably a major factor, and it's probably that if you know how to find termites. That little trail that comes up to your slab and all that. That's probably what that is. That's selfishness right there. Like, that's termite problems. We got it.
Well, I remember years ago the kids asking, like, who do you think of our kids will have the best marriage?
Wow.
And I
They
know,
wanted to compare each other back then?
I guess, but I remember you saying that, well, whoever's the most selfless
Right.
will be the best wife, be the best husband, have the best marriage. And so obviously that's the opposite of this. But I mean, it's true. The more selfless you are, the better your marriage is going to be. So yeah, selfishness destroys.
Oh, yeah, because I'm not getting what I want. And you actually have a couple of Bible verses.
Wow.
Imagine
You
that.
sound shocked. Well, Luke 9:23 says, and he said to them all, if any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. So the idea is the Bible tells us we're to deny ourselves instead of looking at everything I need. And
Well,
so-
right. Obviously, that in the context of that verse, it's a little bit different than like saying,
Sure.
but it's just saying that we are to deny ourselves. But the next verse, Philippians
2:4 says, look not every man on his own things, but every man also on the things of others. So
and especially in a marriage.
Yeah.
You're trying to make this work. You have two different personalities coming together, don't always see eye to eye.
Yeah.
The more selfless you are, the better chances you're going to have at being happy.
Yeah.
But it's like, I'm not getting what I want. Well, it's not about that. You got to work on that. And so anyways, so that was number one.
Well, I mean, even with
selfishness.
that, you're going to have differing ideas about what's the best thing to do.
Yes.
And you need to be able to communicate and talk that out, but still at the same time, everybody getting what you want all the time is not the right answer.
Well, no.
And, as much as we may joke and say, "Hey, just keep her happy,"
Yes.
that's not always the case.
But that
That's
doesn't
not
happen
gonna-
in life. Like on a job, it doesn't happen. If one person always gets their way, so in a church, you work together with people. And fortunately in a marriage, you are working with this person a good bit on very important issues.
Yes.
And so you need to make sure that you humble yourself and at least hear people out, and work those things through. So the second one that we came up with that is an issue in 2025 is
dangers with media.
dangers with media. So we kind of lumped these all together with the media in general.
So for them, it was their movies and the books and
Right.
the magazines or
Well,
whatever
people don't
they
read
had,
anymore
so.
today, so
Yeah.
we throw that one out. No, people still read, but it's more of like with social media. They definitely didn't have to deal with social media in
did not.
1955.
Yeah.
But the problem with social media, and I'm not sure if we were taking some of these off, and I forget where we ended up with some of them on the list. But problem with social media is that people from the past come back.
Yeah.
And there might have been a reason to leave some of those people in the past, like old girlfriends and, whatever. But you have access to all these people, some that you know pretty well, some you don't know. And it's so easy to have an online relationship.
Yeah, you develop a relationship with somebody that, you enjoy talking to more and more. And I mean,
Right.
obviously you can see there's a great danger could be there.
Right.
So.
And that just is That's a huge termite in a marriage, that if you are spending more time chatting with other people than your husband or wife, it's going to grow, and that's what you don't want.
Well, not only that, but like even like Facebook groups, there are groups where like ladies will get on and just talk about marriage and, hey, I have this problem in my marriage. And then the more you spend time, I don't know because I don't do this, but I think if I'm reading about all these people and all their discontentment in marriage, I feel like that could maybe feed to maybe like, wait, you're upset because your husband does it? My husband might do that too. You know?
Well, maybe that would help.
Even in addition to that, just the quantity of time that people put into social media.
That's true.
We're talking about, your possibility of developing a relationship that's not good.
Right.
But at the same time, all relationships on social media are very, very shallow.
Yeah, very shallow.
And you're spending time, like you said, getting opinions of other people, looking at what they're obviously not reality.
Yep.
They're not living in reality. Nobody puts reality on social media, right?
No, not well. When they do, it gets really ugly.
Oh, yeah, that's right. But it's one of those things that just there isn't a lot of benefit. I mean, it can be, to be able to. To be able to keep up with folks on a limited basis and see what's going on in their life, but it can also be very much a time waster.
Oh, it can. And if you have problems with social media, and there's a Media Talk 101. We've interviewed Philip Telfer before. It's great resources for that. But there's also like phubbing. And if you're not familiar with the word phubbing, it is when you're ignoring someone by them talking to you, and you pull out your cell phone right in the middle of the conversation and start texting or looking up something and going,
Well, who would ever do that?
I think every one of us have done that before. And, the point behind that is not that, like, for one, it's rude.
Right.
And we do that to people sometimes. And it's basically what you're saying is whatever you're saying is just not that important. Yeah. And we do that to people that are closest to us at times for some reason, like because we just take them for granted, which we'll get to later. But I
actually thought it funny. I watched a clip today from President Trump's first cabinet meeting. Okay. And this individual's talking, and he pulls out his phone, and he's on his phone, and he puts it back in his pocket. Trump does. I'm like, that's interesting.
Yeah. Well, when you're the president, you can get away with that. And then other things under TV, YouTube, just all these things consume. They can be underlying issues. I'm not.
Just all depends on what you do with all those, what you use, what you view, what's all coming in, and how you interact with all of that.
So number 3, I think, is a huge one, obviously. Because it encompasses a lot, and that is pornography, as long as other addictions. So any addiction is not good, unless you're addicted to Jesus and you A to J.
A to J.
But pornography obviously is damaging, and alcoholism and gambling and drugs. So all these things are extremely damaging. In 1955, we were thinking about this, like they didn't really have pornography issues. Like you had to go to places.
Yeah, not readily available.
The access was extremely different.
Alcohol was always available and was always an issue. Drugs, not as prevalent until the 60s, and then it exploded. So they had addiction.
And then even like gaming.
Gaming.
There's huge problems with gaming addictions, which obviously in 1955 wasn't an issue, but today there are many, many, many wives that complain about that.
Yeah, they spend too much time playing Monopoly.
What is that? I don't know. But so any kind of addiction, all that is going to be the underlying issues of, like I was telling you, we were driving somewhere. I'm like, if someone stumbles upon and watches pornography once or something like that, or goes to a gambling site once or twice, or whatever, it would be like, what are you doing? Like, why? But if you're constantly going to that well, that's just destructive. It's just like, okay, this isn't a one time. This isn't a one off. This is a you care about yourself.
Yep, that's back to the root cause of selfishness.
Right. This is all you care about, and that's a huge problem. Yeah. So we could talk about that one, a lot more, but we got to move on. And number 4.
This one's interesting. Feminism.
Yeah. So in 55, they probably didn't struggle with feminism as much. I mean, in the 20s, you had the women's liberation movement was starting, obviously, and it's always been kind of going and going. And then once World War II came into being, the women started working and joining the workforce. And this is the issue with feminism, is that like they want to take over. And they see us
as in women,
right? Feminism. The females want to be in charge, and that goes against what the Scripture talks about. Is that men are head of the homes, as Christ is head of the church, as God is head of Christ. There is an order. And feminism wants to disrupt that order, and to the point where they want everything to be equal, which is not true, can't happen. But in the workplace, you have, for the first time in history, really in the last 100 years, you have men and women working together in close proximity, and you wonder why there's problems. It's like, I'm spending 8 hours a day with this person, and I might get attracted to this person, and you don't think that causes trust issues and jealousy issues and affairs, and look at what we have today. And that's not all because women joined the workforce. I mean, guys need to control themselves, that's for sure. But it doesn't help that you have these issues, you know what I'm saying? Right. And you work in an office, I don't. Yeah. So I'm surrounded by a bunch of dudes. But you can see that firsthand, how that can be a huge problem.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you get people working together, just like you said. Yep. If there is an attraction there, and it's there for a long period of time you're with somebody, that could be a problem. Especially
if there's problems at home. And it's like, hey, I have a better time with you than with my wife at home. And so anyways,
I found it interesting. So one of the things that they listed in 1955 was men's and women's clubs. Did this come into that at all?
No,
didn't bring
not
that
in
up.
That section.
Just curious, the women's clubs and feminism. I could see some of that, but
I'm still trying. I'm scratching my head with women's and men's clubs.
Well, I mean,
it's just more and more things that we do separately.
I get it. Mm-hmm. But we just talked about a men's retreat, last week, and
but it's regular things that we're, I do this on my own. Yeah, right. I do this here, and I do this. It just starts to, as we know, your schedule can get filled up pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So
and you have a note here about feminism.
Well, I just have. Feminism has talked about no boundaries, no commitment, and as a result, we've got a generation of young people who really don't think about until death do us part. So it's just, that's what feminism does. And I do feel like this goes back to social media, where it kind of creeps in, you start to, all these other people, this is what they're doing. Right. And so it's like,
But what does the Scripture say? God has a way of doing these things, and that's the important thing. Yeah. And if we go with what the way God says it, it usually goes better. Yeah. But if we're constantly competing with each other and fighting, that's just going to create problems and termites in the home. So,
not to overstate the obvious, but from our perspective, that's the key point to all of this. What are your principles based on? Right. What are you building your relationship with your wife or your husband? The structure of your home. What's the basis of your decision making? Yeah. And it needs to be on the Scripture.
Absolutely. If it was up to just me, I don't care. I don't care, whatever if you want to do this, but God does speak about these things, and I'm like, well, because God speaks about it, it must be important, and because I love God, I want to do what He says. So that's a very good point. Right. Number 5 is an interesting way of saying this, but I guess we'll explain it.
Assumptions. Go ahead, explain.
So, assuming, basically, is this the one where you take each other for granted, basically, huh?
Well, this is like the opposite of goodwill. So, with goodwill, when you do something or you say something, I think good things about it. But when on the opposite end, if I assume when you said something or didn't say something or whatever, I take it as, you obviously meant whatever. And I make assumptions.
You assume the bad.
Right.
Yeah, and you assume they're always doing the wrong. And maybe because there was history there and all that, but we have lost goodwill. and giving people the benefit of the doubt. And sometimes they've lost the benefit of the doubt, but there is no regaining that. There's no forgiveness. There's no working on it and helping people out that have struggled with things in the past and maybe they have messed up.
Yeah.
And how do we treat that? You know, that's it can't get better unless someone forgives, you know?
Yeah. Well, and it's hard to, you know, somebody's assuming something of you, then it's like they already know. Oh, I already know what you're going to say. I already know what you're going to think. So it's like, I have no way I could change because it's already assumed what I'm going to do or how I'm going to respond. And that's kind of unfair and doesn't do good things for a relationship.
Yeah, so it definitely destroys communication and like it's just over.
Why even respond? Because you already know. Why did you even
ask me? You already know the answer.
Yeah.
So what's the point?
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. And number 6, you just get into some other notable issues.
Right.
This is just a quick list, so we'll hit them all. Divisions over children, money problems.
Well, we'll just go quickly. You know, the divisions over children. What do you mean by? So I was like, what? We divide up the kids? Or that you know, what do we?
Well, I mean, if anybody who's married knows that children sometimes bring some problems.
The best and worst out of you.
You know, I mean, I have favorites. You have favorites. I don't have favorites, by the way. All my kids listening.
She just said it. She had favorites.
I don't have favorites. But I mean, but if for whatever reason, you know, I think you shouldn't treat this one like this, and then you do think you should, and I think this one, you know, it's like we have different perspectives, and that can cause problems.
It can definitely.
For sure.
Yep. Money problems?
These, once again, most of these are universal and like
all time.
1955 to 2025 is all money problems. I mean, back in 1955, that might have been the number one reason why people got divorced, right? Now it's a little bit further down the list because who cares about money? We just don't get along. And money does create that problem, whereas you have a 2-income home where women are now in the workforce and it's just going to happen. And I bring home money, you bring home money. This is where selfishness comes in, where we don't work together as a team. Because if I treat it as I work, it's my money, then you would never spend the money because you don't work, but you don't get paid.
Yeah.
And so it's like, no, it's our money. And so if you have that idea of I'm going to work, it's my money, you're going to tend to be a little bit more selfish with your money.
Yeah.
And that's going to create problems. Well, you spend your money on what you want. And like, well, how about we are on a team? And that's where it gets tricky because then you have to talk and discuss and agree and all that.
Decide what's priority and what you can't buy.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to make some tough decisions. And and letter C, you know,
lack of appreciation.
This is the one where you take each other for granted and you just don't appreciate, and that's a huge one. You just kind of get rolling with life and you just kind of just get going and you don't really appreciate what the other person does. You don't appreciate your husband and the time he spends working and, you know, whatever, or the woman. Maybe she's working.
I think this is one where we have to actually realize that we're limited in our time.
Yep.
And we have to make decisions on, okay, are we going to be able to continue to, like you were saying, our schedule fill up so fast.
Right.
And you can get to a point where you're just running all the time and you're literally just tired. Yeah. And you don't have the idea that you're going to appreciate each other because you're just tired.
Yeah. I don't know how that feels, but that's what Sarah keeps telling me. She's like, you don't know what it's like to just be so drop dead tired. And I'm like, I pace myself. That's what I do.
Well, and I just think with this, like, you have to realize these things just erode and erode and erode. So over time, it's like, you know, I don't expect you necessarily every day to be like, oh, thank you for this and thank you for this. And,
no,
you know,
but that would be nice.
It's nice, but, you know, you think about in a marriage where you're not doing that hardly at all.
Ever.
And I'm like, over time, I'm finally tired. Like, seriously, you're not ever going to be grateful for the things that I do.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
No, and the next one here is boredom. Interesting.
What is that?
Yeah.
Boredom.
Yeah, we found a lot of these. We just kind of got the most, and we'll talk about the last one. But anyways,
well, some marriages just get dull, and if we don't, you know, sometimes you got to spice things up. You got to, you know, hey, let's read some marriage books. Let's do something fun.
Is that what we're doing? You think we need some spice in our life?
I think more spice is good. We live down south.
So you're saying that if you find yourself in your marriage that you're bored, you need to go get a marriage book from 1955. I don't know.
It was interesting.
That might not be. Yeah.
Yeah, but no, and the next one is bitterness. And once again, any age, this is not a good one.
Yeah.
How does it start? It's like, well, how should bitterness gets in here? Just slowly. It's a little bit at a time, just like those termites. It just takes one and slowly eats away. And maybe there was an argument. Maybe there was he doesn't appreciate me. Maybe, all these different things that come in play. Yeah. And you're just like, you're bitter. And that's not, someone's got to be better.
Yeah. Well, and we did a whole episode on that. And bitterness, we know, just will eat away. Yeah. It destroys.
Yeah, so. Hebrews 12:15 says,
looking diligently, lest any man fail of the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness springing up trouble you, and thereby many be defiled.
So not only does it ruin things, but it defiles you. So think about that.
Yeah.
So you found a verse here in Song of Solomon. So the last one we didn't put on here, but every list that we could find with modern day issues, termites or little issues that is adultery, and I'm like, I don't think that's a termite. I think that's someone lighting a fire in the house.
Yeah, and, there's a lot of things that lead up to that.
Yes.
So those things I would say are more the termites. Once we've gotten to adultery or whatever, I'm like,
the one you wanted to put in that I nixed was impure thoughts, and I was like, that's just very weird. It's like, yes, it's true, but like, where are we we're gonna cover that with other issues, but yeah, the adultery, like, okay, if you're in a illicit relationship, then yes, the termites have already come out and your house is already crumbling.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's a termite, but that is an issue today. But anyway, but speaking of which, so Song of Solomon 2:15.
Yeah, so obviously we know Song of Solomon is all about the love between this man and this woman, and I read the whole chapter of chapter 2, but verse 15, in the middle of all that, it says, "Take us the foxes, the little foxes that spoil the vines, for our vines have tender grapes." And so it's the same idea as like the termites. It's these little things that are going to come in and they're going to bring.
We got to tend to get the foxes out.
Right. So anyway, I just thought that was interesting that was right in the middle of this, book of all this love.
Yeah,
so.
Because in love, a lot of things can take it away and can destroy it.
Yeah.
Whether it's foxes or termites or, all these little things that we can call it. It's distractions. It's things that slowly creep in that we neglect, and they cause problems later on.
Yep.
And that's kind of the point that we're talking about. Hey, we need to pay attention. We got to be intentional on these things. Yeah. And so reading these books are fun.
It is fun.
I was reading through the quote here you had by the individual who was describing the foxes, and one of the ones that he had in his list was an unforgiving spirit. And that's another, I don't know where it would fit in on the list, probably fit in one of those, but that's a good point.
Yeah.
If you're going to have issues within your marriage that are going to require you to forgive.
Yeah, and you can put that with the bitterness, because if you live in unforgiveness, you're just going to be bitter.
Yeah.
Just like my husband's a bum. He just, maybe if you get him to that place where he can open up and you can forgive, and same thing with her, she, whatever, her, she, the girl.
The woman.
Yes,
okay.
The woman. But so anyway, I know this isn't exhaustive, and I know there's maybe some issues you're like, hey, well, email us and say what you think an issue in 2025 is so different from 1955. Yeah. And remember, people, this is just 70 years ago. So think about 70 years from now. Yeah. What could be the issues? That's well, I won't be here, thank goodness. But that's just crazy to think in 70 years, all these different changes and the dynamics in society and relationships, at the core, nothing's changed. Like, a relationship is still a relationship, but how we deal with that in society has definitely changed. And God's word still is the standard. So we need to go to God's word to see how all that works.
Marriage.
All right, babe, we continue on with the marriage theme. The challenge that we had was to get all these books, small books, and about yay big, if you can, it's not very big, maybe about 3 hours to read?
Books that, tried to do between like an hour and 2 or 2.5 maybe.
Okay.
Basically,
No
so
more
you
than
can,
3.
in 15 to 20 minutes a day, you can read the book in a week.
Yeah, and it seems like we've been going 30 minutes or so. But anyways, we found this old book, and here it is. If you're watching on YouTube, it's a very old book. As you can see, it looks like an old book. It's actually 70 years old. It's from 1955.
1955.
Yeah, where they refer to black people as Negroes, and I'm like, what? So I'm like, this is
Times have changed,
the
but
times
anyway.
have changed, and so anyways, if you think about that, that's before the Civil Rights Movement. That's crazy.
Yeah. Well, the book, for those of you that didn't see it, it's called How to Be Happily Married.
How to Be Happily Married.
By
There.
E.J. Daniels.
Yeah, he was an evangelist, and so anyway, we went through it, and it turned out to be your favorite so far.
Okay, so we've only read 3, and the first one was fine. The second one, not so much, and this one I really liked, and I like it because, for one, it's short, which the other ones I guess were short too, but they didn't seem quite as short.
Oh my goodness!
But this one, I felt like was very straightforward. I felt like
It was
very,
almost too straightforward.
very to the point. The first chapter, after he says why he's writing the book, which I guess is chapter 1, but then the first chapter is like, keep up your courtship. And it was just very basic. It's like, you know what? We should take care of ourselves and the things that,
Yeah, basic things like that. And then he goes to chapter 3, which is all about sex. And
no, chapter 3 is the termite chapter.
Oh, okay.
Which is
right.
what brought us to what we're talking about today.
I guess I skipped that one.
Anyway, so the termite chapter, and then...
Which was what brought us to our subject today.
Correct. And then
Yes.
he has a chapter with a few, I think the sex chapter was next.
Yes.
And a whole chapter based on that, which, maybe
In 1955.
Maybe it's uncomfortable for some people, but in marriage, it's a big deal.
It is a big deal,
so
actually.
it's something that should be talked about that so many people don't want to talk about or whatever. And it's important. So I'm like, wow, in 1955, he had a whole chapter on it. I'm like, way to go.
Well, but it seemed like it was, 1955, which was only 70 years ago. And it was I was curious to see what was going on back then and what people would write about. And it is kind of interesting how things change in 70 years.
Yeah.
And I mean, the truths of Scripture shouldn't change that much, right?
Right.
And I know the Bible is an exhaustive book on marriage. I mean, it has some basic verses that everyone has been always talking about for years. Mm-hmm. But his angle, it was different. And he ends it with a long...
Well, before he ends it, then there's
okay.
another chapter that has a few rules, and they're just they're very short. Like he'll say the rule, and then he'll kind of give a paragraph to explain it. So, like the first one is, be as considerate of each other as you would of others. And you think, well, duh. But you know how many people in marriage we're nice. Somebody comes, to work on our house. We're like, oh hi, whatever.
What are you saying?
That's not. Well, I'm just saying, in general, it's not how we always treat each other.
We just had someone work on our house this week. But.
Anyway, and then give attention to small things. Don't make comparisons. Spend some time apart. Which,
yeah, that was interesting. But then he said, don't spend too much time apart.
Well, okay. But I mean, I thought, well, hey. And then be pals, have children, if possible. Let the husband be the head. So, I mean, I felt like it was all very biblically based, short, sweet, explains
almost
it.
Too short. I felt like some of these things, the way he would present things was, here's my opinion, and here's a anecdote to back it up.
Yeah.
A lot of stories, some funny, some things I've heard. Obviously, this is 70 years old, so
right.
these are stories, anecdotes that are timeless almost. But it was fine. Like it wasn't the worst, but it did show you how dated it was. It was very dated.
It was dated, but I feel like it's good. And then to top it all off, the very last chapter, he gives a clear presentation of the gospel. And basically, he's like, in order for you to have a great marriage, it's great to know Jesus. And I mean, you need the gospel, and here's why you're a sinner, and here's how you can be saved. And I mean, it was well done.
Well, and he's an evangelist, and he did a very good job. Like it was reading the chapter, I'm like, this is very long, but it is a very exhaustive. Well, not exhaustive, but it was thorough.
Yeah.
Of him giving the gospel to people, and so he's given this book to people who are getting married, and maybe they're not so sure. Maybe, especially in 1955, you might have a lot of cultural Christians and people who just go to church, but maybe not know the gospel so much.
Yeah, well, to be fair, I mean, anybody that's picking up the book because maybe they are struggling in their marriage, there are many people that just don't know Jesus.
No, and you want answers to your marriage. you have two believers that love Jesus, and this is one of my biggest frustrations. The people that I've known that have separated and gotten divorced, they both claim to love Jesus with all their heart. And it's really difficult for me to buy into that, because if you really do have two people that love Jesus, you're going to have differences. You're going to have frustrations. You're going to have arguments, maybe. Yeah. You might even have times where you just can't stand the person. I get it. I don't get it. But,
What are you saying?
I can understand that. But with Christ, we learn to work it out. You learn to forgive. You learn to do all those things because of Christ, because of what he's done for us. And so, yes, if you put Christ at the center of your relationship, it's going to fix things. Yeah. It's not completely always, Christ does, but you have to be a willing participant, the husband and the wife. And so like what he said in the book, if one person is a Christian, it is not a Christian marriage. It takes two. And that's true. You could have one doing all that they can and praying and doing what God wants you to do, and it might help. Mm-hmm. There's no doubt. And you could do what you can do. But it's for it to really work together, you both have to be submitted to Christ. Yeah. And so I appreciate that. It was a very long chapter, but if you want a chapter on the gospel, it's in here. It was actually pretty good, and it was a very thorough gospel presentation.
Yeah. So I like the book. I thought it was fun to read.
It was fun to read.
It was fun also
interesting.
because it was dated, so it kind of made it fun. We were, different times we're looking at each other like, huh? Like,
yeah. Some of the words and some of the expressions, I'm like, that must have meant something in their day. And there's some other words that maybe have different meanings today. And I was like, I'm sure this didn't mean the same, but okay.
Yeah. So anyway, I think it's a great one if you want to have some fun in your
marriage.
There
it is again. It's the how to have a how to be happily married by E.J. Daniels. We found this at a thrift store, I think
so, yeah.
So it has the P.O. box and everything. I looked it up and someone else took it, but it was another ministry. But I almost sent that in. It says, send it into this P.O. box, and I was curious to see what would happen if I did. But anyway, that is that book, and we're trying to find another book. And maybe if you guys out there have a small book that you know of, maybe we could go through it and tear it to shreds. No, okay.
Wow.
Just kidding. So there's that book.
Missionary Stories with Chuck.
All right, Chuck, we got another story here. While we were talking about appreciating our wives and husbands or whatever, we appreciate Joshua and his work. He sets all this up every week. And I told him he needs to do a video of how he does it. So if for some reason he can't do it, we're really out of luck. So we can't do it. But it'll be a bad show.
You think you'd be able to follow the video?
Maybe with the help of my kids.
Maybe.
So we have Ruchunga Pudaiti, who is a movie star, right?
There's a movie made about Ruchunga. Interesting enough, this was another one. I went to the Baptist Bible Translators Institute website, and they've got some missionary stories there. He was listed. I knew him.
You knew him?
I knew Ruchunga.
Personally?
Not personally. No, I didn't know him personally. I just knew about him. And, and there's a movie made about him. We'll mention that when we get to the end, what the name of the movie is. Really one of probably my favorite missionary movie. It's really well done. Anyway, Ruchunga Pudaiti. A young boy and his father walked together up a winding trail that led to the summit of a mountain in the hills of Manipur in northeast India. Changa, the father, laid his hand upon the shoulder of his son as together they climbed the mountain. Changa remembered the story of Abraham and Isaac that he had been told long ago by a Welsh missionary that had brought the gospel to the Hamar people. On this day, symbolically at least, Changa would lay his son Ruchunga on the altar. At the summit of the mountain, the two stopped and faced the rising sun. This was a special place where Changa always came to pray. Today, it was to be the place where the father sent the son away on an important, dangerous journey. Ruchunga, the 10-year-old boy, knew fully the reason for which his father was sending him far away to go to school. The Hamar people had no Bible. For years after the missionary had been forced to leave these hills, Changa and other converts had continued to worship the God of the Bible and teach their people the truth of salvation through Jesus Christ. These men were getting old, and if the truth of God was to continue among the Hamar people, they must have a Bible.
Yep.
But the Hamars didn't have a written language.
Get out.
The task was immense, and Changa and his wife had dedicated their son to the task. So
Wow.
you get this 10-year-old boy is being sent off from his family
To be trained?
to be trained.
Wow.
To come up with a written language for your people.
And then translate
Crazy.
the Bible
Wow.
into the
Wow.
language. Would he and could he honor his father's request and do his father's will? The first step in that long journey lay 96 miles away across the jungle of India. To send a young boy alone on such a journey seemed foolish, but Rochunga's father had prepared him well for his journey. Mountains would be climbed, rivers would be crossed, and wild beasts would need to be avoided. But Rochunga was not afraid. He knew that his father would be praying for him on his mountain. Changa gave his son some parting words of loving advice. He pointed out the place on the distant horizon to which the boy must direct his steps. When you climb to the top of that mountain at the far end of the valley, look into the morning sun. You will see there another mountain at the place where the earth touches the sky. It is called the horizon. Wherever you go, my son, the horizon always stays before you, leading you onward. As the two were about to part, an elephant trumpeted in a nearby clearing. The boy looked up into the eyes of his father. Changa gave Rochunga some words of experience handed down from his own father before him. If an elephant chases you, run straight ahead, then make a sharp turn to the right. Move straight ahead again and make another turn. 4 times, you will be back on your path.
Oh, wow.
All elephants are left-handed. They cannot turn right quickly to the right. They always fall to the ground when they try.
Is that true? Well, that's crazy.
Wow.
I'm not trying it for one, but okay.
Then Changa added some words of advice drawn from years of experience as a Christian. Satan is like a rogue elephant. He is left-handed too. In the outside world, Satan will try to lead you into sin. When evil tempts you, tell Jesus about it, and he will tumble Satan on his back. Rochunga asked, "Will I know, my father, when I am tempted?" "You will know," Changa answered. "I will be praying here on my mountain." With those words, Changa pulled his son to his heart in a final embrace. God keep you. Rochunga started off into the jungle. The last sight he had of his father was Changa silhouetted against the sky, standing on the summit of his mountain. By the grace of God, Rochunga made it through almost 100 miles of jungle and all the dangers of the forest contained. When he met an elephant on the trail, he remembered his father's words. He forded rivers. He avoided a large bear by running downhill.
What?
He trapped and ate small game for his meals. At one point on the trail, he caught a glimpse of a large Bengal tiger in the bushes. The tiger watched him, but did not attack. Rochunga moved onward and saw the tiger moving too. Mile after mile, the tiger followed him. At first, the tiger's presence alarmed the boy, but he gradually realized that God had sent that tiger to ward off other dangers and hostile tribesmen. The tiger was his defender, and he thanked God. In his heart, Rochunga knew that his father was praying on his mountain. Rochunga's long journey led him from mountain to mountain and eventually from ocean to ocean. Although he failed at times and was distracted from his purpose, he always returned to his commitment to honor his father and follow the horizon that God had given him. Rochunga traveled to Glasgow, Scotland, to study Bible languages. From Scotland, he journeyed to Canada and the United States of America. In Canada, Rochunga met the aged Welsh missionary Watkin Roberts, who had once visited his native land. That was the original missionary.
I was going to say, they never gave the name, but, you got to read on.
He was the one that brought the gospel to the Hamar people. After many years of waiting, the day finally arrived for which Changa had long prayed and waited. As a joyful crowd of Hamar people watched, Changa open the crate that contained the New Testaments that his son had translated. Rochunga had honored his father by fulfilling Changa's prayers and hope for his life. In doing so, Rochunga also honored his heavenly father. Rochunga Pudaiti spent the rest of his life giving the Bible to the world. He married a Christian Indian girl whose name was Laramawi, which means the name of the Lord is a beautiful sound. Rochunga often called her Maui. Together, Rochunga and Maui taught the Hamar people to read the Bibles they now held in their hands. The couple went on to found an organization called Bibles for the World, which continues to this day to send Bibles around the world. Rochunga always liked to say that his family was once a family of headhunters, but now they are a family of heart hunters.
Nice.
Rochunga went to be with the Lord in 2015. The vision that the father, Changa, began and his son, Rochunga, fulfilled still continues today under the leadership of the third generation, Rochunga's son, John Pudaiti. The multilingual hope of the Pudaiti family is that many hearts might be won for Christ until the glorious day that Jesus reigns from sea to sea and from horizon to horizon. So I mentioned beginning, there's a movie. Also, I guess it looks like there's a book with the title of Beyond the Next Mountain.
Okay.
The movie's free on YouTube. It's available. I checked. It's there.
It's called Beyond the Next Mountain?
Beyond the Next Mountain.
Yep.
And like I said, it's probably my favorite missionary movie that was made. Really well done. So
Wow, it's a great story.
Yeah, go check him out. What was his name again?
Rochunga Pudaiti.
Rochunga. But all you have to do is just go Beyond the Next Mountain on YouTube, and you got it.
Yep.
So you can either read the book or watch the movie. Watch the movie's only an hour and a half or so.
Yeah, it's closer to 2.
Okay, 2 hours. Reading the book might be more. So, time management. So, all right, thanks, Chuck.
Music with Sarah.
What song do you like?
All right, babe. This is the song of the week, and I'm just looking in here in our studio. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tripods. That's funny, but just lined up.
Random thought. There we go.
And only one camera right now. So anyway, so this song goes in the Wayback Machine. I don't know when it was written.
2006. That would actually be 19 years.
2006. Anybody born that year?
Elizabeth was.
Elizabeth was. Whoa, wow, what a year! That was a trying year for us because she was a preemie.
Yeah, she
born
was.
on Christmas, supposed to be born March 10th. That's a lot early. So look at her now. But anyway, so this, do you want to give the background of this story?
I
First,
do.
should we say the song?
This song is Mighty to Save.
As you could probably hear by now.
By Hillsong, and it did come out in 2006. So, and there's many versions, but
Yep.
yeah.
But the original one is still the original.
Yeah.
It's the OG. But so anyway, the reason why you just like the song,
I do.
but it has a lot of meaning for you.
I mean, it's a great song. I can go into all the words. You can hear the words. You can go listen to it. But to me, it is more like, I guess I would call it an anthem song. I know you like how I always categorize songs, but I just love.
I thought this was a reminiscing song.
Okay, well, it is a lot of things. But I love the chorus just that says, Savior, He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. And it just, I don't know, it makes me happy. And it just makes me think, no matter what we're facing, which we all face different things all the time throughout life, but it's like our God is mighty to save. And reading, again, I'm reading through the Old Testament, just all that He does. I'm like, our God, His arm isn't short, It's like I just read that with Moses where God was like, you think my arm's too short that I can't, do
Some
what
people
I'm
think
saying?
that. Yeah.
And anyway, so He is mighty and he's so many things. But this song actually has more meaning. I don't know, maybe not more meaning, but it takes me back to a different time.
Well, because when we first got married, we got married in '99, right? Yeah. And we were going through a lot of transition. So we grew up in a charismatic household. I was going to say household, but we weren't related.
Each of us were in charismatic
we grew up in a church, and we saw some stuff. It was very emotional, and I loved it. I loved it at times, but as I was in Bible college and things like that, I wanted truth, and I wanted to know the truth, and I started to understand Christ on a different level in Bible college, and then we got married. But even in that time, it's like you can kind of go through a dry spell. And it felt very I wanted the letter of the law. I wanted to do everything correctly. So we house church. We're going to do this. Well, it come sometime in the early 2000s, music started bugging me just because of the modern music. And as some of you listening can relate, like this modern music can just get on your nerves. And like, is this really even Christian at this point, you know? And so we just kind of chucked it all. And I said, no more. We're gonna go back to hymns and just listen to hymns. And I am very grateful for that time period. I'm glad we did that for a season, because we learned a lot of hymns that we never knew. Yeah. We didn't grow up with a lot of hymns like some of our Baptist friends did. And there's some great hymns. There is some, we learned a lot of great hymns during that time period. Yeah. But also during this time period, it just was like, one of the reasons why no more music, it was just like, I didn't want, church to be an event of where it's just an emotionalism. And that's what it felt like we were missing. And I'm like, no, it's all about truth. But something that we learned was it can be both. It can be truth and emotional, because God is a full being, and so emotion is part of it. And your sister said, man, you haven't heard this song, you should listen to this song. And this was around the time when we were getting iTunes and you could get one song for 99 cents. And so she shared it to you or whatever, so you listened to it. I don't even think YouTube was around back then.
Yeah. Not for us. I don't think so.
No, right. And so you listened to it and just was like, man, this is a great song. Yeah. And so we listened to it. We're like, what are we doing? That we can't just judge songs based on what they are. There was a lot of garbage at the time, sure, just like fluff and puff and whatever. But if a song really touches you, what's so wrong with it? So we started going back to kind of correcting the curve, just going all the way from hymns and to back to this, where now we can enjoy everything. And so Hillsong had some really good songs, and we started going back to listen to some of the more modern worship songs. And I'm very grateful for that, because I feel like we're missing something if we just we cut out something. It's kind of like a diet. You cut out something, it's not usually good for you.
Well, we take one time period and we say, okay, from this year to this year, anything that came out, we will accept. And then if it's between these years, it's like, nope. We just throw it out just based on years. And everybody's got to land where they got to land and be led by the Spirit and do what's good for you and for your family. And there can be different seasons. But for us, this was a changing of season. And, I just thought it was great. I thought it was great to see, some of the richness that I found in the hymns. I'm like, oh, wow, these words are just as rich. And this is really solid. This is good. I want to sing this. I believe these things are true. And so it was just, for us, kind of a turning point. So it always kind of takes me back there. But I think it's a great song. And
and if you're looking for reasons to not like things, the beat, the driving beat or whatever, well, find something that doesn't, if you don't like it. Yeah. But you try to over-spiritualize it by trying to say it's sin to have a driving beat or whatever. And you listen to this song, and you can probably hear it. It doesn't have that bad of a driving beat. And but it's a catchy tune, and there's a place for it all. We did an episode years ago talking about the three types of music: the hymns, the psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs that are mentioned in the Bible. And there's a place for 7-Eleven songs. It's fun. Kids learn those things. Adults learn those things very easily. It's a good place for hymns, where you might have a long, too long sometimes, but long, verses and a chorus, and then these other modern songs. It's fine to have feelings and feel things. Yeah. So I'm glad I went through that phase, because we were able to appreciate the hymns, and where maybe I didn't before. And so we learned a lot of new hymns and continue to learn about hymns, some of these not newer hymns, but some of the hymns that we're unaware of. But we can also embrace some of the newer ones. I still use judgment. I don't like every new song that comes out. Right. But this was one that kind of did that for us. Yeah. And and he is mighty to save.
He is mighty to save.
Everyone needs compassion. Everyone needs a love
that's never failing.
That's right. That's how it starts. But So anyway, that's Mighty to Save by Hillsong. There's many different versions, but I would suggest going to the first one, right? The original.
Yep, just the original. But there's many versions, and I'm sure there's a lot of good ones. So check it out.
Go check it out.
The Mike Charleston Show is brought to you by Fellowship of Believers. For more information, go to our website at fellowshipofbelievers.org. Thank you for listening. We hope we have encouraged you to stand strong in the Lord Jesus and grow in Him.